give it a shake every day for 4 to 6 weeks, and you'll see that the liquid starts to colour up.
I think I haven't found a plant that doesn't have any medicinal properties.
So why not just get started with a few leaves in hot water and see how they taste? But there's one really important thing to say. Put a label on it.
Hey, welcome to a new episode of the Food Forest podcast. And there is much more than just food you can get from a food forest, but you can also get medicinal stuff from a food forest. And for this, we have a very special guest here today, Anne Stobart. She is a UK-based herbalist and former lecturer in herbal therapeutics at Middlesex University. She knows everything about healing with herbs. Welcome, Anne. How are you doing?
I'm good, thank you.
So tell me a little bit about yourself. What is being a clinical herbalist?
So a clinical herbalist is a professional who's trained in a wide range of plant sciences, clinical sciences, and has ethical standards and has usually reached a certain standard of proficiency. So my training involved a 4-year program of all of those things: materia medica, pharmacology, and clinical sciences like anatomy, pathology, and so on. And a clinical herbalist in the UK would usually practice by seeing people individually, taking a full consultation, prescribing and advising on suitable herbs and lifestyle.
So in layman words, you could say that you are a herb doctor.
I don't think that's a very appropriate term to use, really.
No?
No, I don't think so. That's implying that I'm a doctor that just uses herbs, and I think herbal medicine is a very different approach to the dominant mainstream medical thinking at present. In a herbal medicine context, practitioners always trying to find the underlying issues that may be causing often chronic problems. So, sorry, herb doctor's not quite the one I would use.
No, but it's actually good that you say that, because if you go to a normal doctor and you say, well, I have this little thing here on my skin, what is this? Then he's going to give something for your skin, but he's not going to look, well, maybe you have something wrong with your organs, which is causing this on your skin. So the doctor is not really looking deeper, but you are looking deeper.
Yes, I think practitioners in herbal medicine take a holistic approach. So we're interested in past medical history, diet, lifestyle, and some herbalists will take a constitutional approach. That's not really my approach. I think I use the traditions, but I have, if you like, updated them with modern medical knowledge.
Yeah. And let's say I take a consultation at you, or somebody else takes a consultation at you. What are the first things you're going to do with that person?
So in the UK, and it may vary in other areas because it depends a bit on the legal situation, but it is legal in UK for individual patients to consult a herbal practitioner. An initial consultation probably lasts about an hour, and we would take a fairly standard approach of looking at past medical events, looking at body systems, looking at diet, and so on. So, and clinically examining any particular problems. And we would be looking, just like other medics, for red flags that might indicate referral for issues that might not be suitable for herbal medicine.
Okay. That's also a responsibility you have, is then at a certain point sometimes maybe say, okay, well, this I can't help you with, you have to find someone else.
Yeah, many of the patients, I'm retired now, so I don't see patients currently, but many of the patients that I've seen in the past would be coming to me with problems that they had been to see a doctor about, but were unable to get any resolution. And sometimes people will be coming because they want to get off medication. They feel as though they've become dependent on it, which is always a difficult one because some medications are pretty essential.
And so you probably also need to know a lot about chemical medication in order to know, well, if this synthetic medication has this effect and you're going to stop this medication, I have to think about
Yeah.
countering that.
So it's quite important to have a good scientific understanding of what's in the herbs, and also to understand, if you like, the range of drugs that are in general practice. And the students that I was teaching at Middlesex University were completing not just a degree in the theory as well as the practice of managing patients in a clinic, but they were certainly looking at quite a high level at what was involved in most medications.
With herbal medicine, can you treat everything, or do you see things that you cannot treat?
I think it's more about claims to cure, really. You can't claim to cure. You can't sell your medicines, herbal medicines, and make claims to cure. And there are some areas where treatment is notoriously problematic. For example, cancer is one of them. And many other serious issues like heart problems, where strong medications or surgery are involved. And really, herbal medicine is unlikely to be making much difference at that stage.
Yeah, because the body has already gone pretty far into a stage of degeneration.
Yes, yeah.
Can you give me an example of a person that went to a doctor or like spent a couple of years trying to be treated in a traditional way of medicine that then came to you and you were able to heal that person with herbs?
Well, I can think of quite a few examples, but the kinds of things that I often came across were people with problems such as struggling with a menopause and having lots of difficulties with hot flushes, joints, sleeplessness, emotional problems. And in situations like that, it's quite often possible to use herbs to improve the situation, to help somebody through the menopause. Other people might come with skin conditions, so eczema type problems. It's not unusual for parents to bring their children, and of course they have to be there to give permission for their children to be treated.
Yeah. And I sometimes, for example, I have a couple of friends who tried a lot of things to get healed for certain diseases, often also chronic disease, and they tried a lot of going to regular doctors, but they couldn't find a solution. But then they went to a herbalist, and then like it went pretty fast or much faster. Can you explain how that comes and how you experienced that throughout your career?
No. I think that it's very individual. Every person is seen individually. And so with some people, the initial problem, maybe sleeplessness or digestive issues, something like that, maybe can be easily helped with herbs and other advice such as diet. But very often then people would come back and say, well, now that we've sorted that, I've got this other problem that I failed to mention. And traditionally, amongst herbalists, it's common to say that there's a month's treatment needed for every year that a complaint has existed. But I'm afraid I never really found that actually matched up completely. It's very difficult to be sure how things would work. Yeah. And I think I would be the first to say to people that there's no magic going on here. If you can't see some benefits then soon, then maybe we should try for 3 months, but after that maybe consider other options. I'm afraid I'm a very down-to-earth practitioner.
Well, don't be afraid, we need down-to-earth people, especially in medicine. When you look at the human body, what do you consider to be health? What is health, and how do you need to treat your body to actually be healthy? Because people are talking a lot about health, but not a lot of people actually stand still and think, but what is the human body? How does it work? How does it become healthy? And what ideally should you do and should you not do?
It's an interesting question, isn't it? Because I'm a grower of herbs and I very much value a permaculture context. I do come across people who feel that if you are involved in growing and gardening and eating fresh fruit and vegetables and nuts, that you're never going to get ill. Unfortunately, it doesn't quite work like that. And there are all sorts of reasons that underlie illness. So there may be genetic makeup as well as past diet. Obviously, emotional and mental health are significant contributors. And it's very difficult to see how we can all stay healthy in this polluted world. It's very hard for many people just to keep maintain a lifestyle that they want nowadays.
Yeah, well, it is true. There are forever chemicals in everything, PFASs, heavy metals, pesticides on everything. And so you say that like having the permaculture lifestyle, growing your own food, it's not the key to health. Is there a key to health, in your opinion?
I wish. Probably thin people live the longest, I'd say. I think that obviously there are studies of people, particularly in Mediterranean climates, who live to significant, or in parts of Asia, who live to significant age. And I think the contributory factors are all well known. A good diet, which might involve lots of fruit and vegetables and fermented items, legumes and the like, plenty of exercise, plenty of fresh air, and a satisfying lifestyle. All of these things must contribute, and I'm sure many of them we would aim for within our sort of busy city lifestyles.
When you think about forest gardening, you are the founder of the Medicinal Forest Garden Trust. Can you tell me a bit more about that?
Yes. How long have you got? No, if I go back a bit, there are plenty of reasons why within my background I decided I wanted to grow more herbal medicines for myself. But the main reasons were having seen tinctures on the shelves in the training clinic dispensary and then in my own herbal dispensary, and seen how many of them were involving plants. Some of them were actually native to the UK and Europe, and some of them introduced, but very few of them actually derive or were grown in a domestic sense within the area. So it struck me, I think when I was still learning to practice, I would see tinctures like hawthorn tincture, Crataegus species, which
I got one here. My colleague made it for me. She's a herbalist as well.
Oh, very good. It struck me as crazy that the hawthorn berries were being imported. They might have been imported from Eastern Europe because labour is cheaper there. They might have been wildcrafted there, and more recently there may be organic sources. But I found that extremely difficult, given that practically every other hedge in England is a hawthorn hedge. Unfortunately, what happens is that farmers, they thrash up and down every year, cutting them back. And as you probably know, hawthorn fruits the year following the formation of a twig. And so flowering and fruiting are often held back. Anyway, so to cut a long story short, I wanted to grow more of my own herbal medicines, not just the herbs, sort of annual herbs, but trees and shrubs. And so as a result of that, with my partner, I got my own medicinal woodland established. And then as a result of that, I tried to share that knowledge. And that's what the Medicinal Forest Garden Trust is all about. It's all about encouraging others to use plants, particularly trees and shrubs, more sustainably.
So they can have their own medicine cabinet in their backyard.
Well, yes. And it is possible to grow quite a lot in quite a small space. You don't need acres and acres. It's possible even in a small garden.
Yeah, can you describe what's growing in your food forest?
Oh, certainly. At the moment, I have a small food forest and herb garden at the back of our cottage, and I've got a whole range of plants growing there, from fruit trees on the walls to figs in pots, and then all around are some of them are specimen trees and shrubs that I would like to propagate. But when I was growing in medicinal woodland, I grew more native plants such as birch and willow, alder, lime, and more. And I also introduced some less common plants in Europe. Some of them are American, some of them are Asian. So we added in things like ginkgo
Okay.
and witch hazel and others.
If you go to the website Plants for a Future, pfaf.org, it's one of my favorite websites, and you can see all the edible plants, but you also can see a lot of the medicinal properties. But in general, like when you look up certain plants, I think I haven't found a plant that doesn't have any medicinal properties. Is it true that like every plant has some medicinal properties, even if they're like super poisonous?
Possibly. I think there are probably medicinal uses for many plants that still haven't been recognized. I think at the moment, probably we're talking about 1 or 2,000 plants that actually have recorded uses. And there's been an American study that's looked more closely at what proportion of those are actually in circulation in terms of worldwide trade. There are some plant families that are not terribly useful. For example, the sycamores, the acers. I haven't really found a use for them. They tend to have very sweet sap, so there may be other ways that they can be used.
There are manganese source.
There you go. So there you go. And then, of course, there are lots of plants which are under-recognised. Many of the conifers aren't recognised. And then there are plants which do contain quite powerful chemicals. So like the yew, Taxus baccata.
Oh, yeah.
And those chemicals have been used for cancer treatments because they are so toxic to cells.
Have you ever tried to do something with the yew?
No.
With the Taxus baccata? No?
No. There is a problem that if some plants contain toxic constituents, that you may not be able to differentiate the therapeutic dose and the toxic dose. And where those are very close, then I think it's best to avoid using them unless you know exactly what you're doing. And if anybody was wanting to do that sort of thing, then they should consult a qualified practitioner. So there are a number of herbs that are restricted in use in the UK.
Oh, yeah?
And,
which ones?
I've used some of those with individual patients. Pardon?
Like digitalis? Is that
no, we don't
restricted?
use the foxglove digitalis, no. But there are some other plants which have actions on the heart, such as lily of the valley.
Deadly, yeah.
But many things can be treated without having to resort to these plants that are difficult to use safely.
Yeah. And for example, like I've always found the yew, the taxus, super fascinating because the red flesh you can eat, but the pits themselves are deadly.
That's correct, yeah.
I sometimes even have the feeling that if you eat too much of the red flesh, you can feel that it's not good for you. Is that correct? That maybe some poison comes with the red flesh?
There may be some of the constituents in a very low quantity in the red flesh. I think the main point being to make people aware that this is something to be careful with. I think education is particularly important because many people don't recognise which plants are safe to use.
They just see, ooh, red berry, delicious.
I can think of a lot of other berries that'd be better.
Yeah. So you have these plants which can be deadly or poisonous, but if you have the right dosage, it can be healing. How can you know as a herbal practitioner when it's the right doses? Do you need special equipment to measure that, or how does that work?
So there are pharmacopoeia or books which record all the constituents and recommended dosages of plants. And there's quite a lot of training around. There's online training, individual courses that can help people to understand which plants they're looking at, how to identify plants, which parts of the plants to use, and so on. And during the more extended professional practitioner training, we include herbal pharmacy, so that professional practitioners know how to extract the active ingredients in plants using alcohol in tinctures, and perhaps the comparable approach with water or sugar in syrups, glycerol, other ways of taking those plants. So we have a fairly good idea. There obviously is variation depending on how plants are grown and how they're harvested. So we also have to look at the quality of the plants. So we have to be sure that they're botanically correct,
Yeah.
that we know they're well identified, and also how they've been grown. So I do think organic certification is particularly useful because it gives us some provenance for plants. But most of the producers, the manufacturers of plant supplements and the like, they will have laboratory tests, so they can use chemical and other tests to check the actual constituents, that they're there. Often they're not in over-the-counter items, to check that those active ingredients are there and how strong they are. Although strength isn't necessarily an indicator of power, so individual constituents might be an indicator, but it's quite often the interplay of a number of constituents that's more important.
Yeah. And if you have your own medicinal food forest or forest garden, and you want to venture into this, you're still a newbie at it, so you still have to learn a lot. Those things you're talking about right now already seem pretty advanced to the beginner, I feel. How would you advise them to take step by step and to know what they're doing without accidentally poisoning themselves or other people?
They could buy one of my books.
Yeah, like the Medicinal Forest Garden Handbook?
So the Medicinal Forest Garden Handbook is about designing your own medicinal forest garden.
Yeah.
So it looks at what sorts of considerations might be important in terms of the site that you have available, what your purpose might be, and so on. And it includes detailed monographs on 40 trees and shrubs, plus also an appendix full of herbs. Of course, there's plenty of herbs that will grow alongside trees and shrubs. And so I include in that book some information about how to make some basic preparations, such as a tincture, a tea, an infusion, and ointments and balms, and so on. And then, because when I wrote that book, there was so much information about trees and shrubs, I added in another 40 and wrote another book, which is called Trees and Shrubs That Heal. And that contains 80 profiles, plus it explains quite a lot about how the active ingredients work in fairly straightforward language. So trying not to be totally boring or complicated. So that is another way that people can get a grip of what they might be growing. I suppose it all comes down to what do people want to do? People express an interest, but is it because they want to have possibilities of self-help, or is it because they're just interested in learning which plants might be medicinal? Are they interested in the history? Some people are interested because they want to make it a business. So I've included in those books some discussion points about how to decide whether it's worth going for that.
Is it possible to have a profitable medicinal food forest?
I think potentially yes, but there are some major issues. And one is the harvest. The harvest needs to be not necessarily substantial, but it needs to be good enough quality to be made into products that can be sold. I think the wholesale market is very difficult because there's a lot of large quantities of herbs grown all around the world with very cheap labour.
Yeah. So you can't compete with
And
that in your one
it is very difficult
hectare
to compete,
food
yeah.
forest. Yeah.
But if for example, you have a farm shop, it may well be possible to make herbal products. We in fact did make herbal body care products with some of the plants that we grew. The other problem is marketing because you can't advertise herbs as cures. You can make limited claims. For example, you could talk about how certain products might help support common complaints or make you feel better and so on. If you look in a pharmacist and you look at the details on the packets, you'll see sometimes the very vague claims that are made. There is a proper licensing system for a range of plants, but to get a license to make public claims is very expensive.
All right. And that's probably a control organism that needs to come, and you have to pay a lot of money to get the certification.
So there is a European traditional herb registration scheme, which covers a lot of common European plants and a few introduced plants for traditional uses. And so each of those plants has been looked at, and a monograph is available online, which will say what they've been used for. So some tree leaves might be used for medicinal complaints such as urinary problems, that sort of thing. So it is possible to say that on some labels if you're selling teas, but it's fairly limited, and it's very expensive to get a monograph produced, especially if a plant hasn't been used for a long time. And then if you want to actually go and do clinical trials, that's even more expensive.
Yeah. What is a monograph? Not everybody knows that word.
Great question. So monograph's really important because it gathers together all of the information about a particular plant. So it will include the name, the habitat, and the constituents. Sometimes it will include traditional uses. Some monographs have been gutted and removed. That sort of historical information has been removed. And then it usually will include all the references to scientific articles that might or might not support the use of that plant. It should also include advice about toxicity and cautions, and information about preparations. So there is a European pharmacopoeia online. You have to pay to access it, but it's full of monographs about medicinal plants.
So it's like a biography per plant.
Yes, that's a good way to describe it. Yes.
All right.
And some monographs are better than others.
Okay.
So, as I say, some monographs will include traditional information, but not all.
So the 40 you have in your book, the Medicinal Forest Garden Handbook, you like rewrote that monograph to be very readable for everybody.
So I've tried to make them accessible. They're not long and detailed, but they do include some information about cultivation. So if you look at the Plants for a Future website, there's a lot of really useful information about cultivation and so on, but very often the medicinal information is hard to make sense of because it is gathered together from a lot of different sources without any analysis.
Yeah, they use also a lot of words that not everybody know. For example, a diuretic, for example, not everybody knows what that means. So then you really need to look that up.
Yes, I mean, having a glossary helps, that's for sure.
Yeah, that's true. And the 40 plants you include in your book, or the 80 if you look at your other book as well, are these like foolproof plants that you like can't go wrong with?
So, yeah, mostly, yes. They're quite varied. So, as you will know from permaculture, one of the things that is really important is what we call stacking, the idea of maximizing the use of space in a growing situation. So what I've tried to include in both books is a wide range of plants from the overstory to the understory, tall trees, smaller trees, down to shrubs and perennial herbs, ground herbs, even a few roots. And I've also tried to include, so I've left out yew because it's not an easy one to use. So I tried to include ones that are usable for a wide range of common complaints, and also some for bark, some for their leaves, some for fruits, flowers. So quite a wide variety, really. And in the latest book, the one Trees and Shrubs That Heal, I've also included a recipe, a fairly simple recipe for each plant to try and encourage people to get started
All right.
in making their own things.
So would you say, like, for example, like I've also written some books about food forestry and food forest design. I often say, well, I'd rather you burn the book and start planting some trees than just read the book and do nothing. Would you say the same about your book and say, well, I'd rather have you get started and not get hung up in the details, or are there details that really matter? Because I think if you plant a tree the wrong way, you're probably not gonna poison yourself. But if you maybe make a concoction the wrong way, you might have some side effects. I don't know.
I think with herbs, there's quite a lot of leeway. So it's really
Okay.
easy to get started. And you don't have to have your own growing site. You could be foraging in a local park or woodland. Ideally, good harvest practice would say not near a road, and pick
Pesticides.
healthy looking plants that haven't been spoilt by pests or dogs or whatever. But for example, when we were running courses in our medicinal woodland, we would have people come up and we'd all be sitting out at picnic tables in the daytime, and then we'd go and forage around and we'd pick a few bramble leaves and a few birch leaves and a few other leaves and some mint from the flower beds, and we'd put them all together and with hot water and make a simple tea, an infusion. And what we wanted to do was encourage people to experiment a bit, and very often people were quite surprised at how tasty that tea could be. And so yeah, I mean, that's a great way to get started on a voyage of discovery with plants.
Yeah, and tea is probably one of the easiest things to make. You just, for example, I have some sage in my garden. I take some sage, put it in some tea, put it in some hot water, and then drink it. What's like the next thing you can do? So you've discovered the teas you can make. What's the next thing you can do? Is that, for example, this tincture here I got? Is it?
So you could the tea can be made into lots of other things as well. So it can be made into a lotion or a spray, or it can be with sugar made into a syrup. So sugar is used as a preservative.
Okay.
The tincture that you're talking about actually extracts ingredients that are usually ingredients that are active. So using alcohol acts as a great preservative, but it also gives you a more active product. Tea is probably the safest way to go, so long as you're not brewing up really strong tannins, say from oak, which are inappropriate. They're not too good for your stomach. Willow is quite irritating for the stomach. So if it tastes horrible, then don't drink it.
Good advice. Like,
And I would say with the sage is quite a powerful herb. So I wouldn't drink sage tea on its own. I would put a leaf of sage, perhaps in with some chamomile or with some lemon balm,
to make it softer.
and make a mixture that I could enjoy.
Yeah. Sage can taste pretty strong. So I was once harvesting some ginkgo leaves, and I was making some tea with the ginkgo leaves, and I was saying to my colleague, "Oh yeah, it's gonna make me smarter because ginkgo is making me smarter." And so my colleague, landscape architect, she is a herbalist, and she said, "Yeah, Louis, what you're doing is wrong, because the only way to get certain elements from the leaf of the ginkgo, you need to put it into alcohol. If you, for example, if you read about the benefits of certain plants, it's not always gonna come out if you just put it in tea. Sometimes you have to put it in alcohol in order to make it come out. Is that true?
Yeah, I mean, a tincture is an ideal way to extract the most ingredients. And there are some things which are just not soluble in water, particularly the aromatics, these if you like, the essential oil ingredients. So although it's lovely to put pine needles in your bath,
Mm-hmm.
in actual fact, it's just the heat that's causing the aromatics, not the water, to evaporate. And so it's quite useful to have a mixture of alcohol, A, because of its keeping qualities, and B, because of the extra extraction that you're going to get. And actually, an alcohol spirit like vodka or gin at 40% alcohol with fresh herbs, which contain some water themselves, is quite a good proportion. You end up with a mixture that's perhaps about 25% alcohol, which will keep well. It needs to be over 15% to keep, and will also maximally extract the active constituents. But it
Yeah.
can be a bit expensive.
Yeah. But you can just buy regular vodka, gin, or rum too, probably.
Yeah, I mean, I would go with vodka or gin because they're the least flavoured, if you like.
Yeah.
But there's no reason why any alcohol base that's 40% or so shouldn't be used.
Yeah. And so you can just buy any bottle from the store. You can go
Yep.
into your food forest, read your book, or check plans for a future. See, okay, for example, this leaf is good for this or for that. For example, like,
Yes.
say melilotus. You say, well, it's good. It's gonna help me sleep better. I'm gonna take some of it. I'm gonna put it in a jar of alcohol. Then what do? I let it simmer or sit there for like, I don't know, a week or a month?
So I've just done this with valerian root, which was growing really well and it seemed ready to be dug up.
Mm-hmm.
And what's important is to make sure that the plant material is clean, and then chop it finely if you can. Some people use a liquidizer. Whether it's leaves or roots, it needs to be chopped finely.
Okay.
And then cover it, make sure it's well covered with the alcohol mixture. If it's dried material, you can make the vodka go further by diluting it with white wine, because you don't need quite so much alcohol, and leave that to stand in a window ledge, perhaps on a shelf. Give it a shake every day for 4 to 6 weeks, and you'll see that the liquid starts to colour up. And after 4 to 6 weeks, you strain out the plant material, which can be put on the compost, and then you're left with a tincture. But there's one really important thing to say: put a label on it, because it won't look, it'll just be brown or greenish brown. And it's very important to put a label on with the name of the plant, the parts, the date, minimally, and sometimes it's a good idea to record the alcohol level as well.
And what would happen if you, for example, take some time, for example, you put it in vodka and you just leave it in there for 5 years and without taking out the time, would that make a big difference?
So I used to do a regular stock check of all my plants. All the dried herbs, they had to go, if not at the end of the first year, by the second year. All the tinctures I would not throw out until 4 or 5 years, because like sherry, they will keep. So long as there's at least 15% alcohol, they will keep, well, not indefinitely, but quite a long time. But they will begin to oxidize, which means to say that because of heat, oxygen, air, and light, they will gradually begin to discolor and start to smell a bit off. So they need to be replaced from time to time. But so, for example, recently it would have been, they've gone over now, lime flowers, which would be ideal to dry for a tea. They could have been harvested for tinctures, because we're talking in early July now. And so they will keep, but some tinctures perhaps are best replaced after a year, perhaps the more active ones. Otherwise, they keep pretty well.
Yeah, all right. And then to consume them. So a lot of the times you get this little bottle with this little pipette in it, and you take some drops out of it. Or you can have this spray, and I just spray it in your mouth. Can people just could they just drink tinctures like they would have a shot of vodka, let's say, and just like have one shot glass and say, well, to your health, and then drink it? Would that
I
also
wouldn't
be?
advise that. I would suggest diluting tinctures in water,
Yeah.
and something like the valerian root, maybe a teaspoon, 5 milliliters a day, would be perhaps split into 2 half teaspoons and taken in water would be appropriate. Other tinctures might be taken more frequently. For example, cramp bark, or you might know it as Gelderose, Viburnum opulus.
Yeah.
It's a fantastic antispasmodic, which is ideal for people having period pains, menstrual periods. And that's something that might be taken a couple of teaspoons every 4 hours.
Okay.
But that's quite unusual. And a herbalist approach usually would be to make up a prescription with 4 or 5 different tinctures. So the prescription would be specially arranged so that maybe a teaspoon 3 times a day would need to be taken. So it's a good idea to get advice and to check. I've suggested dosage in my monographs, and most sold tinctures will give a dosage. You can use really strong tinctures as drops. You were talking about a dropper, and 20 drops is usually considered about the same as 1 milliliter. So 100 drops would be considered the same as a teaspoon. So that's another way to take, say, some of the more bitter herbs. For example, wormwood is extremely bitter and is used to stimulate the digestion. And that might be just 20 drops in water.
Yeah. Do you think that a food forester that has a regular food forest and now is going to hear our wonderful podcast together, who says, wow, that's amazing, I'm just gonna go in and add an extra dimension to my food forest. I'm gonna get, of course, your book, the Medicinal Forest Garden Handbook, and the other one which I'm gonna put into the show notes of this episode, so people can just click on the link. It will be very easy to find it. Would you say they can just go ahead and like plant all these plants, start experimenting, make these little bottles of mixes of 5 different plants that all have similar properties, and can they just go ahead and do all that, or are there some limitations? Because I have heard, I got some bottles prescribed, for example, and they say, well, you can only take it for 3 weeks and then you have to do nothing. Or you have, after 3 weeks, you have to take some tea, which is good for your kidney, to clean your kidney. Or if you take this, you have to take something for your liver afterwards. Because can it become complicated?
I think it doesn't need to be complicated.
Make it
really
simple for us, Anne.
I think it's great just to get started. I mean, why not just get started if you have got astringent herbs, which are particularly things like the bramble and the rose and the such like. They all taste very tea-like. So why not just get started with a few leaves in hot water and see how they taste? Astringents are usually really good for sore throats and many digestive troubles. Or if you've got soothing plants like lemon balm and mint and chamomile and such like, why not just get going with a tea mixture of those? The key really, once you get started, is to begin to identify plants more and to realize what plants could be grown, what might be possible. But very often there are many plants around about which are already there for the taking. So I would say just get going, follow your gut instincts and have a go. With leaves, you're not likely to go far wrong. We've already talked about berries of yew being potentially poisonous because of the seeds. If something tastes really bitter, don't eat it. Be very careful with certain plants in the carrot family, because some of them can be quite toxic. Interestingly, the carrot family and the potato family, although some are very edible, there are some members of the carrot and potato family which can be quite toxic. So it's quite important to develop your identification skills. Maybe go on some foraging courses. That's quite a good way to find out what's edible. And very often some of the plants that are edible are also medicinal as well. So there's a big overlap there.
Yeah.
So I would really like people to get going, and they can sign up for my Substack newsletter, Medicinal
cool.
Tree Woman, and start to see some ideas there, where I write about planty things, plants that you can grow, gardens that you can visit, and suggestions for other things that are possible.
Oh, great! I'm gonna have to add it at the show notes as well. So for people who don't know Substack, it's a kind of newsletter made easy. You can just
It's a
have a
kind of
subscription to it.
patronage based scheme where most of the newsletter posts are free, but if you want to support the writer, then you can pay a paid subscription as well, and it's getting quite popular.
Yeah, more and more people are doing it to other also, like you say, be supported, because it takes a lot of time, energy, knowledge. So it's logical that people get awarded for that. All right, and what I said before, when people say after 3 weeks you have to stop taking certain tinctures, is there like a general rule in that you can't just take something forever?
So most traditional use plants, because they're traditional use, they've been observed over a long period of time, and most of them, the ones that we might be familiar with, like chamomile and lime flowers and so on, are pretty safe to use. But it is worth checking, and most monographs should say if there are any cautions or contraindications. I think the plants to be, apart from the plant families that I just mentioned that can have some toxic members of the family, there are some actions, herbal actions, which are inadvisable for a long period. So, for example, stimulating laxatives, which some people want to clear out their system, and usually it's better to find a way of relieving constipation on a long-term basis,
Eating
rather
more
than
kiwis, for
constantly
example.
using stimulating laxatives. So many of the barks of the trees that I've been talking about can be quite stimulating. So bark remedies perhaps should be used for 2 or 3 weeks only.
Yeah.
There are also some bitters which are quite stimulating for the liver, and again, they should be avoided for lengthy periods of time. Some plants might be, if you like, just wear out their use. So people often think that purple coneflower or echinacea is good for stimulating the immune system. And I think that research evidence suggests that it will improve your immune system, but only for a short few weeks.
Otherwise
Not
it
much
will
point
wear
in
out.
taking
Yeah.
it long term.
And
And then there are also some essential oil-containing plants which are potentially aggravating for the kidneys. So plants like juniper and the like, again, these are urinary system plants that perhaps need professional herbalist advice. So it's good to try and find out more.
Yeah.
And you can often look online and get quite a lot of information. Plants for a Future does carry warnings which are
yeah.
quite strong. Might
Yeah,
put you
yeah,
off.
they don't want to have any lawsuits probably.
I think that's probably, yes, they don't want any legal
Be
issues.
sure that it's
Yes.
this one. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think that in Plants for Future, they verge on the side of extra caution.
Yeah, and
But there is good reason to be
yeah.
cautious.
And
Yes.
for example, wild teasel or Dipsacus fulonum is a plant that I find really interesting because they also use a tincture for Lyme disease, for example. But after that, you also are supposed to like clean your kidneys. So that's also because it's maybe because it's because you need another kind of substance to take the poison out of your body or something like that.
Yes, I mean, I'm not sure that any herbs have been researched effectively for Lyme disease. So that's one where I would say is definitely worth talking with a professional herbal practitioner to make sure that you're not doing anything inappropriate. And some cures, for example, there are oil cures for gallbladder stones, are actually very misleading because what's being produced is not stones, but small fatty conglomerates which look like stones. So people think they're passing stones, but they're not really. So
You mean the Andreas Moritz great liver and gallbladder cleansing? You mean that one?
I think if you're trying to do something with liver and gallbladder, then again you preferably get some advice. I mean, I think it's wonderful that people do self-care, and I think there is just such a bonanza of plants out there to choose from that we don't really need to be using ones that might have potential problems.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, all right. Interesting. If you look back at your career, what have you considered to be one of the biggest challenges you ever had?
challenges. I think one of the hardest things for us in this day and age is effecting change that is long lasting. I very much subscribe to permaculture ethics, people care, planet care, and future care. And so, obviously, I'm retired now. I'm quite keen to pass on my knowledge, and I've been able to do that through the books and also on the Medicinal Forest Garden Trust website. There are some links to online courses. And if anybody's interested, I've just issued a free taster course. It's
Cool.
3 lessons about designing, harvesting, making, and understanding medicinal trees and shrubs.
Nice.
So
We're gonna put it in the show notes as well.
yeah, people are welcome to. So one of the things that I'm really proud of is being able to contribute to educating others. But I think it's very difficult in this day and age, partly because we talked right at the beginning about the difficult market. Although you can make herbal products, you can sell them at the farm gate or at fairs and so on, it's hard to maintain a lifestyle. So one of the things that I was very proud to do with other folks was to set up an organic herb growers cooperative. But it didn't last because we were so busy trying to make a living that we didn't have time to extend it. And we had lots and lots of people coming to us and saying, we can grow stuff. What should we grow? Who can we sell it to? And so on. But we didn't have people who wanted to put time in or put funding in and administrative support and so on to make a lasting contribution. So what would make me proud would be if I can make the Medicinal Forest Garden Trust into an ongoing organisation. I'd love to see a band of advisors, people like me who are trained in herbal medicine and trained in permaculture, people like me who could be around and available for consultations, for designs, and so much more. My experience of creating a wonderful woodland medicinal haven showed me that actually there's no one size fits all, that there's lots of different possibilities. And we have allotments here in the UK which are the 300 square meters.
Yeah.
And
Something like that.
you could grow a lot of herbs as well as fruit and vegetables on an allotment. You don't need a woodland or a large site. And there are so many community projects now getting established. I think there is a great future. What I would like to be able to say within a few years is that we've been able to establish the Medicinal Forest Garden Trust or something along those lines to get people really safely using herbs that have been harvested right, grown right, high quality, and looking after themselves, really, helping themselves. I think that's the big key.
Self-empowerment,
Absolutely.
that you know that you can be your own pharmacist, let's say, for a lot of things. If you look at the world how it is today, and you probably have a very deep vision on pharmacology, on the tradition, or like, I wouldn't say traditional medicine, because the real traditional medicine is 1,000 years old. I'm like talking about chemical medicine. In an ideal world, how would you see like the role of herbalists, the role of general practitioners, doctors, the role of a pharmacy like we have them today, the role of a herbal type of pharmacy?
So there, I mean, at the moment, the system is very distorted because of the profit motive, which is why the permaculture ethics are so important to me. Because in the permaculture ethics, profit is reinvested into the system. So cooperative and community efforts would be the ideal way. I think what's important is that herbs are powerful, and so people need to use them responsibly. It's very problematic for me when people take something that I've mentioned and then try and pass it on to everybody and saying, this is it, this is the one, because that's not the way things work. And I think we can, through those structures, community interest companies, for example, and cooperatives, I think we can make these plants more readily available. But we would really have to see a bigger change in society so that we weren't stuck with all these capitalist profit-making pharmaceutical organizations. I'm not saying that kind of biomedicine isn't necessary. They should be able to work together. There should be a future for integrated medicine. But at the moment, it's very difficult to see how that would work as equal partners. There are examples, though, elsewhere. For example, in China, traditional Chinese medicine is part of the mainstream provision, which is great to see. And we know from the World Health Organization that there are many areas, usually less well-developed areas, that use more traditional medicines. But it's not necessarily the way forward for us in Europe.
And do you believe that in Europe, United States, Australia, that doctors should also become herbalists, that it should become an integral part of their study?
They used to be. They used to be trained in materia medica. I've met elderly pharmacists who can remember being trained in plants. I think the problem is that nowadays medical professionals are trained in a way that excludes anything that's not based on a particular kind of science, and perhaps we need to rethink the approach to science and clinical trials and the like.
But herbalism is like all these plants, it has been scientifically proven what their effects are. So what's wrong with that?
We do have lots and lots of evidence of mostly not clinical studies. So the problem at the moment is there's lots and lots of evidence about the constituents and how they likely work in the body and so on, but there's no incentive to fund clinical trials because you can't patent a plant. You can patent a product.
Now sage is mine.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So you can patent a product, but clinical trials are very expensive. So obviously what's needed is less profit motive and more perhaps government or other bodies to support clinical research so that we have more evidence. I mean, there's massive problems out there. For example, dementia and diseases of old age, arthritis and so on. So much could be benefiting from herbal medicines, and yet we're not making that possible.
So wouldn't you say...
Sorry.
Yeah. So wouldn't you say that when that the way we have medicine right now is totally undemocratical because doctors follow clinical trials, but clinical trials are only done by big pharmaceutical companies because they have the incentive to try kind of medicine because they know they will have huge amounts of profits from it. So this way, it's the only thing that doctors are looking at. But let's say you would have as much as money that goes into that going into the trials of herbs, let's say, then the doctors would have the choice. Is it correct to say that it's not democratically right now?
Not sure whether it can be called not democratic. I know one thing, that if you talk to doctors about what kind of plants they would value for their own use and for their children's use, many doctors do use herbal medicines and have a much better understanding. but the way that they're trained, and because of fear of litigation, they themselves are trapped in a very difficult system. So I think that it's not that it's undemocratic, it's just that it's not a collaborative approach, and we just need more. We need more people power. People can take responsibility for their own health to a certain extent and help themselves using plants. But if they do that, they have to educate themselves. They can't expect to be safe unless they know more about what they're doing. So it's kind of like freedom to use plants comes with responsibility to be able to start to learn to identify them. I mean, our parents and grandparents and so on probably had a better idea of what plants were available in the countryside for food, for foraging, and what plants were safe to use than we have today. So we need to regain some of that knowledge. And I find when I take people on walks and talks that people are fascinated to know what they can use, what they can't use. They're amazed at the possibilities. So I don't think it's going to be too difficult to do this. But yes, we need more people power to get involved.
Yeah. And probably also have the mindset that if, for example, a lot of people now, because, and especially if you go to the UK or to the USA, in Europe, in mainland Europe, it's let's say, I think less than in UK or the USA. But if you walk on the street, you see these big billboards of, if you have pain in your throat, get this chemical medication, or you see television ads saying, oh, they also have like problems with your stomach, get this. That now we're like always pointed towards the pharmacy, but probably when people get more and more information and inspiration, that they will have another way of thinking and say, okay, if I have sore throat, I'm gonna take this herbal remedy book, or I'm going to go to a herbalist instead of going to a pharmacist or going to a doctor.
I think that would be great. I think it's very noticeable that pharmaceutical companies and larger kind of health companies have taken steps to buy up smaller holistic approach type companies. Right across the world, we can see that those organizations are being bought up and control taken of them. And what we need to ensure is that some of them have more resilience. Again, we're talking a permaculture term here, in this capitalist structure, so that they don't get taken over and, if you like, diluted or devalued. The same is happening with seeds, plant species. It's very difficult for people to get hold of many of the plants. So we need to build up alternative structures. But we have technology now. We have crowd farming initiatives using technology. So we ought to start using some of those extra tools to support this, support the ability to be more self-sufficient.
Yeah. And isn't it also a bit skewing our behavior that if you go to a GP, to a general doctor, you get paid back money in a lot of developed countries? So the money you pay for a doctor is like artificially lowered, but if you go to a herbalist, you have to pay the full price. Isn't that also like having a huge influence?
In the UK, most herbal medicine is on a private practice basis. So that means that it's completely separate. There are some practitioners who work within charitable alternative practices and treatments, and there are some community clinics. The training schools run community clinics as well. So there is a very limited level of availability for people who can't afford to pay for private practice and the like. And that is, I think, an ongoing issue. But I think people do have more power as consumers. For example, they could demand always to buy organic products, which again would support more responsible producers. And also perhaps people need to think about the money they might save if they consult a herbal practitioner, even on a paid basis, to get some advice which they can use in the longer term. So a herbal practitioner will usually try to wean people off problem lifestyles or medications, so they won't necessarily have to pay forever. I often think that actually it would be cheaper to see a herbal practitioner about a particular complaint than it would be to get my car serviced. And sometimes we have to rethink our priorities as well and make more demands of the system.
That's so true. If our car makes a strange noise, we're like panicking and say, "Oh my God, we need to go to the garage and get it serviced." But if you're
Yeah.
like having a little ailment, you're like, "Oh, maybe let's wait a couple of months or when I have the time." So yeah, there are a lot of mindset shifts that need to go on. And we're gonna wrap this podcast up, but before we do that, I have a final question for you, and that is, if I would give you a magic wand, what would you do with it? You could do anything you want.
A magic wand. Well, I think I've already answered that in a way, because I was talking about the Medicinal Forest Garden Trust becoming a much more active organisation with a group of advisors and consultants that could provide training, visits, site visits, and lots more advice about sustainable ways of growing herbs, whether for self-help or for community use or for profit or other ways. So that would be my magic wand, would be to make the Medicinal Forest Garden Trust into a massive organisation that everybody could draw on.
Fantastic. And people who are listening now and share this dream, how can they participate in this as a consumer, but also as a contributor? For example, if herbalists would be listening right now.
Well, get in touch and we can see what's possible. At the moment, one of the things that I get asked about quite a lot is places to visit where people can see medicinal plants being grown and being used. And so if you are already growing and using medicinal plants and you'd like to be visited and show people what you do, or if you'd like to join me in writing something about that, then do get in touch and we can spread the word around.
Fantastic. Well, it was super inspiring, Anne, and I think for a lot of food foresters out there, knowing that there's even a bigger world than just edible plants to put in your food forest, but also medicinal plants, it just opens an entire new door, an entire new dimension. And I'm very grateful that you explained it so simply and so, like you said in the beginning of our talk, so much grounded, and also gave us the non-herbalists the empowerment to just get started and say, okay, just like read the book, plant it, forage it, or even don't even plant it and just find it somewhere growing in the wild and make that tea or even make that tincture. Buy a bottle of vodka, put some plants in it, shake it for 6 weeks, and there you have it. You have your own medicine. So thank you so much for that, Anne. Any last words of wisdom you want to share before we end?
No, I think that thank you for the opportunity to talk about my favourite subject. And I think I would encourage people perhaps to start with a bit of plant identification. Just have a look around and see if you can find out more about the plants around you already.
Voila, we're gonna do that. Well, thanks for listening to the Food Forest podcast. See you again next week for a new episode. If you want to learn more about food forests or medicinal food forests, go and check www.foodforestpodcast.com, and there you'll also see the show notes of all the wonderful things me and Anne Stobart just have been talking about. See you next week. Ciao, ciao.